Hello, welcome back to my channel. It's been a while, didn't mean to be so long. Um, Basically, because I got a bit busy at the end of the year. Lots going on at work. I have a pretty full-on job too, so I just find doing videos isn't always high priority. But I'm back in 2023 in a new year. So what better way to have a little wee wrap up of all the books I read last year? Um, I'm not a huge I don't read a huge amount of quantity of books in a year. I read 17 um, last year, so it's kind of generally standard. I like to raise it up a little bit. I think in the past 10 years, my least was 15, my most was 39. So it'd be nice if I could get to 40 books this year, but yeah, 17. I'm pretty happy with that. It's kind of standard for me, and it makes this wrap up a lot easier. So I will get right to it. Um, so they're basically just in kind of size order, really, and more than like when I read them or anything. Just got a convenient stack, and it's better just to have it kind of in the size rather than any particular order of when I read them. First is the only ebook I read this year. Um, it's Patricia Highsmith, The Talented Mr. Ripley. This was part of AJ Dunn's fantastic Discord, like monthly thriller um, reading book group they have on Discord, and also on their YouTube channel. Um, I started off strong, and then I really dropped to the ball pretty early on. But it was great fun to have the discussions, and it was actually a pretty decent book. I think I've read other Patricia Highsmith, and I've always admired her writing more than I've enjoyed it, or wanted to just straight away read more like other kind of crime thriller writers that I am fans of. Yeah, I'm not entirely totally sure why I will read more Patricia Highsmith, but I generally kind of just read them in a kind of slow, like I'll read one every year or every couple of years or something. I think part of it might be that she's a pretty extreme misanthrope, which I think really also kind of led to a lot of hate in her life, and probably quite a lot of self-loathing too. And I think it probably hits a little too close to home. Like I'm a low key misanthrope. Really, I don't. It doesn't have any ill will to anybody, but I kind of do like to be on my own most of the time. I do have a kind of low view of humanity as a whole rather than necessarily individual people. Um, but I think seeing it in a more extreme, and it's just, yeah, like her books are never. There's never any likable characters in it, and I don't always mind that. But it's tough to read a lot of it for me. Anyway, so that was it. Next up was probably my favorite book of the year. I couldn't add this to my Goodreads because it's not in their database, and I couldn't figure out how to add it. They seem to have controlled that. I don't know. Maybe I have to go on the computer or something, but I couldn't do it on my phone. So it's not actually in my Goodreads. If you follow me on Goodreads, it is Private Performance, and it's very curious because it says Glenn Watkins there, but I think that Glenn Watkins might actually be the artist of this amazing artwork, because in the title page it says Private Performance by Elliot Brewster. I probably did research this at one point, and didn't find a whole lot of information on either. But I have a feeling that, yeah, that possibly Glenn Watkins is the artist, in a rare nod to giving them credit. And this book was originally published by Phoenix Press in 1945. and this is like this edition comes from 1949, newsstand library edition. So it's kind of right around the advent of the paperback original. This is kind of like the last vestiges of like their cheap reprint press. Um, it's vivid, vigorous, sensual. It's definitely written for a male audience, but it's not like it's not a crime book or anything. It's just I don't know how you would. I mean, it's kind of the male version of like, well, I guess what they would call chick lit or something. I don't know. It was great though. I loved it. It's talk about unlikable characters. There's no one really that likable in this book. It basically is centered around Corliss Trimble, who is my favorite character that I've read about this year, and she has basically got to the head of this fashion empire by sleeping her way to the top, essentially. Um, and then her first husband comes back from the war, kind of penniless. Yeah, I mean it was written in 1945, and it was really topical when it discusses the there's actually someone still serving in the war. I think Tyler's just been released, possibly from injury, but there is actually someone that is still serving in the war too. So it is quite current to the times. But essentially, she slept her way to the top when her first husband that she on her way to the top, she kind of ruined him. So he comes back basically looking for revenge, and his idea of revenge is kind of doing what she did to him. She kind of ends up falling in love with him, even though she has been working on her kind of final marriage to someone who is uber rich, like generational, stupid, wealthy rich. So she kind of blows all that up to pursue Tyler, whose only interest, even though he's married, his only interest is really to ruin her. And he doesn't really care about his wife because she's a nymphomaniac. Then at one point, Corliss tells because the nymphomaniac wife is like 10 years younger. Basically tells her that instead of just going after any man for sex, if she targeted rich men, she could be very successful. And so then I think the Tyler's wife ended up marrying or goes after the guy that Corliss was after originally. It's all kind of very complicated. Everyone hates each other. There's no one likable. They're all money grabbers. I feel like the author is kind of in on the kind of look at the despicable middle class, nouveau riche, upper middle class kind of desire for money. But it's not really a deep look at kind of that. It's more just like, how can I get in a bunch of sexy scenes and fun times of people running around sleeping with each other's wives and husbands. And it does feel pretty misogynistic most of the way as well, but not really in a way that is gross. It feels more reflective of the times and things. But yeah, great fun. I mean, Corliss is written really well. I thought it was a fantastic character. I think it's probably like 35 and described as past it and stuff, but you know, I guess that's we still have those issues now, okay, I guess. So that was that, and the artwork is fantastic. I got it on the strength of the artwork and just the marketing, as it is basically looked really trashy, and it kind of was. Next up, I read this for June on the Range, Louis L'Amour, The Focus and Rifle. This is the first Louis L'Amour book I've read, and it's one of the later ones. I think it was originally published in 1973. So it's a later Louis L'Amour book, but you can really see why he's loved. It's not the greatest book. I can't even really remember what happened. Basically, there's Ronan Chantry is given a prized rifle by I think it's set just after the American Revolutionary War. But he's basically during that he's given a rifle from an Englishman, a dying Englishman, basically. It's a really prized rifle. And then he goes off. He's from the East. He's I think he's probably Boston. He's some like Boston bank or something. But his wife and kid die in a fire, and so he goes out. He goes out west to basically try and make it as a rancher, I guess, something like that. He's just looking for something to deal with the grief that he's experienced. There's hints that there's hints that his wife and child possibly died by nefarious means, and he might have been involved, but that doesn't really go anywhere. He tags along with a bunch of guys. They end up rescuing. They end up rescuing a woman who then gets kidnapped, and then they rescue her again. And yeah, it kind of just really doesn't go anywhere. The dialogue in Ronan's head's pretty good, but you can see why Louis L'Amour is a great author. I love just the plotting's a bit average and kind of like bunch of loose ends, don't really go anywhere. But it was still decent and good fun. Can't complain. Next up is all of the Executioner books that I read this year. So that's number 4, Miami Massacre. Number 5, Continental Contract. Number 6, Assault on Soho. And number 8, Chicago Wipeout. And I actually ended up reading Continental Contract before Miami Massacre, just because I couldn't remember. I forgot where I was up to. And it really doesn't matter as long as you've read like the 1 or 2, or you have the basic kind of concept of what's going on. You can read them in any order you want because it doesn't really matter. There's a few that are direct sequels, but they don't really tell you if it's a direct sequel. So other than that, you can read them any order you want. And I'm basically just reading the ones that I have in paperback, and so that's why it jumped from 6 to 8. I decided I wouldn't bother getting e-copies or anything. I might go back eventually, but I have so many of the paperbacks that I'm just going to read the ones that I happen to have. And they were all pretty samey, to be honest. They're all good fun. They're always good fun when you're in it, and kind of forgettable as you go along. The standout of them was definitely Assault on Soho. One of the better ones that I've read. It was good fun. Probably more fun because I'm from Britain originally, so I know. It's kind of a little bit funny when it's like on your own home turf. It's done pretty well though. Like he does use lingo, British. He does use English lingo, pretty good, pretty well for American. There's maybe 1 or 2 slight misuses, but other than that, I thought it was pretty good. It was also kind of set in this like sex club kind of thing going on, which was pretty fun. I do quite like reading about I do quite like when trashy books do have a kind of fetish part to them for some reason. I don't know. It's still pretty tame. It's like 70s, and it's not as tame as I'm used to because I'm usually used to reading pre-50s, but it was still pretty tame for like today's standards. The Chicago Wipeout one was pretty good too because it was set in like the height of the mafia, and I thought it was quite interesting. Talking about kind of like how Chicago was a little bit different the level of corruption, um, how basically that the politicians are worse than the mafia. The mafia are are kind of controlling the politicians, but the politicians take it to a next level because they said that usually mafia run cities, it's kind of a bit like they're pillaged and burned to the ground, whereas Chicago is able to keep functioning as a very corrupt city. And it was kind of interesting how um, the politicians stop it from being like a scorched earth mafia campaign, and it's actually maybe worse and scarier in some ways. So I thought that was quite good social commentary. But it's very surface level social commentary. I mean, you could probably do a really huge deep dive into the Executioner series and really look at how it deals with PTSD of Vietnam War people, but I don't really think most of it was intentional on the author's part. So you could probably find it there if you're looking for it, but I don't think it was necessarily what I don't really think it was what Don Pendleton was going for when he was writing these books. Next up is John Soule, The God Project, where this is part of Horror Mayhem. Actually, I guess a lot of my reading was influenced by reading events this year. So, The God Project, this cost me $0, 0 cents. The God Project by John Soule, this was good fun. You see a bunch of John Soule books in the charity shops. I think the reason this is probably free was because I got it from a well-known Christian charity shop, and I think they don't usually carry horror, and so I think they just kind of needed to get rid of it. Good fun, very perfunctory, but in a good way. Like it's adequately written for a thriller. Like it moves along nicely. There's no real massive flourishes, author flourishes that kind of separate him from any other thriller writer. But it's not bad, like kind of Dan Brown kind of writing, where it's overly explaining everything. The twist was very obvious. I could see that coming, but it didn't detract from my enjoyment of the novel. Next up, another great cover by Dead Pigeon by Robert P. Hansen. I have no idea about the book. This is another Bantam repress who originally published it. The MS Mill Company, who I've never heard of. So originally published in 1951, and the Bantam did a reissue in 1953, and this one's from 1954. A great cover. It's nice to see the man in a state of undress rather than the woman. This was great fun, actually. This was I was first when I started talking about it, I was like, I actually don't remember much about it, and then I looking at the covers just then, and it clicked actually what this was, and this was absolutely great fun. It starts basically with a guy down to like his last couple bucks trying to get from LA to New York, or at least California. I think he's in LA, to New York, and he basically I think he spends his last dime or close to. I think he's left with like a couple bucks when he buys the airplane ticket, and there he overhears a guy that is desperate to get on the next plane. He has a ticket booked for the plane after, but he's desperate to get to New York straight away. So this guy arranges to switch tickets for a fee, which ends up this guy's private investigator, and he's more than happy to. But because he's already checked his baggage, they make an arrangement to do a swap. to meet up in New York to do a swap of the bags. So when our protagonist lands in, I think his name's Mr. Lanigan. His name's Lanigan. When he lands in New York, there's no word from the guy. He ends up going to his hotel room to wait for him, where someone comes and beats him up, thinking he's the private investigator guy. Then he learns that the plane he should have been on actually crashed. The final, because it was a stopover, so he's a stopover in Cleveland and then on to New York, and it crashed. And so he thinks that the private investigator died, and then later finds out that the private investigator actually got off in Cleveland. But now he's all embroiled in this whole situation. He has a bunch of money. He's given a bunch more money, and then he's beaten up. So he's kind of like takes offense to the beaten up, but he's also like intrigued by the money, if there's a blackmail going on or whatever, and it just spirals out of control from there. Couple of femme fatales get involved as well, and then he's like falling in love with one of them, and he wants to sex up the other, and yeah, it was just really good fun. I'm kind of forgettable. I remember the basic plot now, but it's kind of forgettable along the way what happened. Didn't want, but it was a lot of fun whilst I was reading it. Next up, Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. This is part of my Christie reading project. And I actually did have another Agatha Christie book that I don't know where it got to. I read 2 Agatha Christies this year. But I don't know where the other one went to. The other one was Murder at Hazel Moor, aka the Siddiford murder. But yeah, Death on the Nile. Good fun. It's very slow into actually getting onto the boat. I think it's like almost halfway through until someone dies. Until like basically the murder happens. It's very slow. You are with Poirot like pretty much the whole way. Like Poirot is on this trip that they go on. There's a little bit of the start. There's a bit of the start where we don't have Poirot, but there's there is I mean, at the very start actually he happens to be in the same nightclub that 2 of the central characters are in, and it kind of is him seeing the interaction actually it helps him solve the crime at the end, so it's a little bit massive coincidence that he was there. But it was definitely good fun. I could see where it was going. I knew basically who had committed the crime pretty early on. This possibly could be because of a latent memory of watching the movie way back then, or even the David Suchet version of it. I do not remember either, though, like consciously, but I guess subconsciously. But it's also just like once you've read a few Agatha Christie, you get into the kind of mindset of how she plots the novels. And generally, if you read a lot of crime mysteries, there's kind of only so many ways it can be done, and so it never gets to be. I never really judge it on the kind of final denouement. It's more like how you get there. And Agatha Christie is generally pretty good at getting there. But it's generally my kind of I think I've only in the past 10 years of reading. In the past 10 years of my mystery reading, I think I've only really been surprised by one kind of final re- revelation of the murders or the what's going on, and that was pretty kind of wild and out there. But other than that, it's generally you kind of see a good a good mystery thriller. You should be able to put pieces together anyway. But yeah, that's generally why I kind of prefer reading other crime too. Something that's got more to say than just weaving a good mystery. But I'd still like reading mysteries, and this would be Agatha Christie is one of the best for a reason. One of the most sold authors for a reason. I read the one. I think I only read the one Matt Helm book this year. These are these terrible Titan covers. I don't know who was in charge of this whole thing, but it was terrible cover design. Other than that, this was The Shadowless. I really don't remember this one at all. They are great though, great fun. Really good spy thrillers. They are a little bit more hard hitting. They're kind of closer to hard boiled than your say like your John le Carre's or later kind of like Cold War kind of stuff. This is early Cold War. These were early Cold War still, though, I think. This was written in 1964, but because he's an assassin rather than he's more of an assassin, I guess, than a spy. He generally he's given a situation and he's told that this person needs nullifying, and it's either that he has to find them, that there's not really much mystery in who they are, or it's that maybe they've changed their appearance, and he has to kind of figure out if he has to figure out who the person is that has to kill. Or sometimes it's that there's other people working with him that he has to also then kill, but it doesn't have necessarily the same cloak and dagger stuff as you generally think of when the spy novels, but they are very good. This one I remember. This one he has to basically fake marry a scientist, I think. I can't remember why though. He basically has to fake marry someone who's basically has a death threat against him or something. He has to fake marry them to be bodyguards, essentially, kind of thing. It was very good though. I just don't remember a huge amount of it. It was very good. Next up, Maigret Gets Angry. This is my first Maigret, despite it being like number 26 or something in the series. I don't think you really need to necessarily read them all in order or any of them. I think you can just pick up anywhere you go. By this time, Maigret is retired, though. I don't know if the ones where he's still a police detective are wildly different or not. This was great. So basically, he's retired. He's tending his garden. Someone comes to some rich person, basically wants to hire him to try and solve a case, and they initially they initially think he's the gardener, and so he kind of like gets really annoyed and that he's disrespected. And yeah, it's basically it is despite Maigret being senior detective, he's still really considered a working class character in these books, especially compared to the uber rich. And it's so there's generational wealth, and then there's but then now the people who control that generational wealth were actually were actually fairly poor and married in to the family, and Maigret actually was actually classmates with um with the two men that married into this generational wealth, and so there's a lot of off play there where you have the kind of like way up snobbery of the generational wealthy uber rich. I think almost possibly even aristocratic. You have the snobbery and disdain of them looking down on him, but you also have the nouveau riche attitude of the two men who married into the generational wealth. And then you just have Maigret just being like, fuck the lot of you, you're all despicable people. Yeah, I know, it was really good. It definitely makes me want to read a lot more of the Maigret books. Okay, The Essential, Albert Camus, The Outsider. A lot of people would say this is existentialist novel. I think Camus disliked that really disliked that tag on it. It was good. It was good, well written. It's not my favorite kind of writing, obviously, but it was yeah, no, it's a classic for a reason, and I feel like you really have to kind of read these things to understand a lot of the fiction at the time. I think it's very influential. I think even for me as mainly a crime writer and crime film buff of the 50s, 60s, even part of the 70s, it's influential on that in some regards too. But yeah, it's basically kind of deals with it like what is life, cheapness of life, and kind of thing too. Yeah, like yeah, it was interesting. It had definitely a lot of points. I had made more of a initial reaction video when I first read it. So if you're looking to know my full thoughts on it, let's go back to that video there. Next up, Greg Ill's Mississippi Blood. This is the third and final book in the trilogy. I guess the Not Just Burning trilogy, I guess you would call it. So it's Not Just Burning, The Bone Tree, and then this. And this sums up the trilogy really well. I really like this. It basically is dealing with it's basically dealing with historic race crimes and current race crimes. It's all very much based on real life, but obviously it's been hugely fictionalized. Not Just Burning, the first book, is absolutely amazing, and I would highly recommend it. The second, The Bone Tree, got way too much bogged down in conspiracy theories, especially regarding the JFK killing. For me, it kind of lost me a little bit there, but if you want to read the whole trilogy, you really have to read the second book, because of some events that happened in the second book really have a knock-on effect for this book. And then what happened in this book to really bring the whole series together, actually really it rescued it for me, and I actually do have all 3 books now because this one really rescued the whole series for me. So yeah, so I would highly recommend reading especially if you're interested in the South and historic race crimes, Ku Klux Klan, and other white supremacist kind of groups. If you're really kind of interested and also, I mean, horrified. It's like it's not nice. It's graphic. There's a lot of the crimes and stuff described in it are disgusting and horrific, but are also based on what actually happened. So, I feel like it is important to reading, and Grayle's done it really well. Um, there is a fair amount of, especially in the first couple books, there's a lot of repetition, and at first I thought it was unnecessary, and the books could have been half the length. But the more I think about it, I think it actually works. Especially, it's the first book is very much concerning a journalist looking into historic crimes, and I think that really does kind of the repetition kind of leads into how much of journalism, investigative journalism, is just kind of like trudging through the evidence and asking people the same kind of questions to really get through it. So I think the repetition does work in providing that kind of context and atmosphere. So yeah, I'm really pleased that I finally finished and then it worked. Just a couple books ago, obviously I don't know where that Agatha Christie book went, but it was Murder at Hazelmoor, otherwise known as the Citizen Murder, and it was pretty good. It was set during a snowstorm, which was kind of fun. Again, I could kind of see this was a little less obvious than Death on the Nile, but I could see where it was going. And it's just generally if you know Christie, if you know kind of how she did her plotting and stuff, it becomes that. But again, it's not really about how. For me, it's not really about who did it. It's more about how the author brings it all together and has all the characters. To me, it's like if the characters are fun, then it doesn't really matter. And as long as it was tied up nicely. But yeah, I probably did another video there describing it. So if you just go into my playlists, you should have all of the Agatha Christie books. Or should be all part of a playlist there. So next up, Basic Instinct, a novel by Richard Osborne based on the motion picture written by Joe Estehays. So yeah, this is a novelization of the fantastic movie Basic Instinct, and I do love the movie for all of its faults. It has a lot of faults, but it's great fun too. Obviously, probably the first movie you associate when you're at least thinking of Sharon Stone, but probably if you're thinking of Michael Douglas too, it's the first movie that comes to mind. It's either that or Fatal Attraction. Was it Michael Douglas? Was it Michael Douglas in Fatal Attraction? I think it was, but I'll have to look that up. But yeah, definitely love this. This is basically what I kind of think all novelizations are like, where it's just a very perfunctory, somewhat boring but accurate retelling of the movie, but kind of taking away all of the fun of the movie. I'm sure not all novelizations. I'm sure there's some fantastic novelizations, but yeah, it was okay. I got through it. Not really looking to read any other novelizations like this. I probably won't be searching out Richard Osborne novelizations. The biggest disappointment was the infamous scene was completely bungled. It was very subtle. Like if you didn't quite read closely between the lines and kind of if you didn't know the movie, you might not really actually understand what happened. And whether you like that scene or not as well is like that's actually one of the really exploitative things that happened in that movie. And I think Sharon Stone has since said that she wasn't fully aware of what was actually going to be shown. So maybe not a bad thing, but yeah, they didn't really create that properly. And the last book to talk about, I think I read this pretty early on in the year though. I have a video, even if it's just a wrap up. I think I have a video talking about it more in depth, and it is Richard Osman's The Thursday Murder Club. And it's quite funny I'm talking about this because I have just been a bit on a Richard Osman binge. I don't know if anyone knows much about what he's currently up to, but he does do a show called House of Games, which is great fun, and I've been watching that, binged that a bit last night. This was good. It was good fun. I think what I probably said in my original this like reaction to this was he always goes for the joke. The joke is tantamount, gets in the way of characters and plot, though the characters are fun and they're pretty decently realized. The plot's pretty average. It goes on too long. Definitely, this one definitely goes on too long. But that's mainly because of trying to get all the jokes in. The jokes are fun for the most part. The jokes are hilarious. If you like Richard Osman's, if you know Richard Osman and you like his humor, then you'll love the jokes in this. Sorry, the dogs at me for attention. So yeah, if you like the if you like his humor, then you'll love this book. And I'm definitely gonna read the second and is there a third one by now? I'm definitely gonna read those, and hopefully I'll either pick them up in the library or I'll probably find it on a secondhand book haul or something, because they're pretty popular. This was a great deal. I got this for like $3 hardback. Pretty. I mean, it might look a little tiny now, but I think that's probably what I did to it. But yeah, I mean, great deal, $3 secondhand. If not, if I really need to buy it, I'll probably just buy it on my Kindle. But yeah, it's good fun. Nothing more, nothing less. Yeah, so if you like gentle humor, protagonist that you don't see very often, I guess. Because it's old and it's also they're very British. It's just very British, yeah. So if you like that kind of thing, yeah, you'll love this. Just check out my video. Otherwise, that's pretty much all I said. That was all the books I read. 17 of them. Pretty decent reading. Nothing that was crazy stand out. Like I said, my favorite was probably Private Performance. The best book I probably read was well, I mean, the best book I probably read was either Simon or Death on the Nile, but the best book in terms of my own personal interest was probably Mississippi Blood. And I guess more I'm biased because it's like wrapping up the series and stuff, and nice to get that out the way and finally laid to rest. Yeah, that's it. Probably do another video at some point. Maybe a 2023 looking ahead kind of plan video, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. 40 minutes. It's pretty much what I was expecting to get it done in. So have a great day, and hopefully I'll make some more videos very soon. Bye.